works. Solar's actually been around for a while, but a lot of the big strides have been made just in the last 5 to 10 years. So it's still kind of a new technology. So a lot of people just aren't quite, don't know a lot about it, which is why we have these information sessions. So I'm going to be going over a few of the commonly used terms tonight, hopefully all of them. You know, it's a pretty small group tonight, so definitely don't be shy to ask questions or clarifications if there's, you know, maybe a term you don't know, or maybe you might think you know about it, but you just want to have a little bit more information. So one of the main words that we discuss a lot is kilowatt. You can think of that as sort of a capacity factor. So a kilowatt is the amount of energy that can be provided in a solar system. So when we talk about kilowatts, we're typically talking about the size. So a house might need a 5 kilowatt array or a 10 kilowatt array or something like that. Kilowatt hour is somewhat similar, but this is basically the amount of energy that a system can do over time. So we typically talk about kilowatt hours. That's how the utility bills you. That's one measurement of how much electricity your solar array will produce over time. So think of that more as like how much energy you use in a month or a year or even a day for that matter. Solar array is another term that's going to come up quite a bit. That's just the collection of the solar panels. And then there's the solar cell, which is what does the actual work within the solar panel. So if you look at that photo right there, that is obviously a photo of a solar panel. Those small squares within the panel are the cells. So they are what that's how the energy is actually made. So the panel is made, cells go into a panel, panels go into an array. So that hopefully should kind of clear things up and get us all started off on the right page. So a solar system, really actually a solar array, a solar system I should say, is not as complicated as what I think a lot of people may think. It's really only comprised of 2 main components, and that is a solar panel and also a inverter. I'm sure we all know about solar panels, but inverters might be a little less known. So what the inverter does is it sort of does the behind the scenes work. It converts the DC electricity, direct current, which is what the solar panels make, into alternating current, AC electricity, which is typically what our homes and our buildings use. So in order to plug into a wall, that's typically AC current that's coming out of that wall. The inverters are warranted for anywhere from 12 to 25 years. There's an option to purchase an extended warranty for those as well. The inverters are really changing quite a lot just in the last couple of years too in terms of technology. Pretty much every inverter right now will connect to the web or to a device app, a phone app, a tablet app. That will allow you to monitor your system. You'll be able to see how much electricity you're producing, whether you're in your living room or whether you're on the other side of the country. So it's really cool to have that sort of extra technology built in for those of us nerds who like to keep an eye on our systems. The other component, of course, is the solar panel. We already talked a little bit about this, but this does the main work. It converts the sunlight into electricity. There's not a lot to a solar panel. The way that solar photovoltaic works is essentially the panels are comprised of 2 different layers of silicon, and it's just a chemical reaction that happens between those 2 different layers of silicon when the photons from the sun hit it. So because it's a chemical reaction, because there are no moving parts, these solar panels, there's really no maintenance. There's nothing to break down. And because of that, the solar panels can last quite a long time, anywhere from 25 years to 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, etc. They're all warranted for 25 years, at least all of the panels, that our contractors are going to be using in this program. But just like a car or like a lot of other items that you buy, just because it has a warranty up to a certain amount of years, it doesn't mean that that product is not good after that time. It just means that if the product does fail to work before that time, you'll be able to replace that with no cost. So moving on, this is a little more in-depth slide of the solar panels. So panels essentially come in 2 different sizes, a 72 cell and a 60 cell. And again, those are those solar cells that we talked about earlier, those small little squares located within the greater panel. And the only reason really that there are two different sized panels is because depending on the amount of real estate on a roof or in a given area you might have to work with, a solar developer might be able to put two 60 cell panels in where they might only be able to put one 72 cell. So they work the same exact way. It's just one is a little bit smaller, so they can be a little bit more nimble with how they design their arrays. So now that you know some of the components, this is essentially what a solar array, or a solar system, I should say, should look like. And before we get into that, I also want to talk a little bit about how these arrays are connected to the grid. A lot of people have a misconception that once you go solar, you know, you're off grid. That is a possibility, but an off-grid system entails a lot more work and a lot more cost as well. And that's kind of where the rubber meets the road. There's a lot of behind the scenes work that has to be done to disconnect you from the grid, to make sure you have enough backup. There's also a lot of lifestyle choices that a homeowner has to make if they do decide to go off grid. Battery technology is great. It's improving by leaps and bounds, but it still is not quite where it needs to be. So for those purposes, we're going to leave off-grid installations out of this conversation. We can certainly talk about it at the end of the talk if that is necessary, but for our purposes here, we're going to be talking strictly about grid-tied solar arrays. And we're going to be talking about that because first I have to preface this with how a normal house works. So in a normal home, electricity comes in here off the power lines, off the grid, it goes through your meter, and then it goes through your circuit box and out into your appliances. In a solar array, in a home with a solar array, the sun hits those solar panels. Again, the solar cells create DC or direct current. That direct current electricity then flows down to your inverter. Your inverter converts it over to AC electricity, which goes again through your circuit box and then again out into your appliances and your lights and your other electrical gadgets and gizmos. So when the solar array is producing electricity, all of your needs should be met. If they are not all met, for instance, on very cloudy days or at night, you can still take in electricity off the grid, and essentially you notice no difference whether you're using solar electricity or regular grid electricity. The other good thing about a grid-tied solar array, not only are you able to use electricity sort of more or less continuously, regardless of the sunshine situation, you're actually able to put electricity back out onto the grid. And the reason that's good is because you can get a credit later on for when you do need to take in electricity off of those power lines. So it happens a lot of times, especially right now in the summertime during the middle of the day, when your solar panels are working, you're creating enough electricity to power all of your appliances. At some point, the inverter sees that you are using all of the electricity you need, and then it begins diverting the excess electricity back through the meter and out onto the utility grid. So it goes down the street to your neighbor's neighbor, et cetera, et cetera. And then, like I said, your meter actually dials backwards. And then, of course, at night on cloudy days, when you have to take electricity back in off the grid, then the meter dials forward. And that is a process called net metering, which we're going to get into now. So net metering can get pretty tricky pretty quick, but basically an easy way to think of it is what we call rollover electricity. So if you remember rollover minutes on a cell phone, essentially, you know, if you don't use them, or if your solar array produces more electricity during the day than you need, again, it gets exported to the grid, you get a credit for that, and then when you need to take in electricity off the grid, your meter dials forward, and then you just have to pay the utility for whatever the difference is of that. Sometimes that can result in, most of the time I should say, that results in very low electricity bills, sometimes even negative bills, in which case you will get a check from your utility for whatever excess electricity you produced over the month. We don't really recommend building an array that's going to consistently overproduce electricity, and that is because when you sell electricity back to your utility, you sell it at a much lower rate than what you purchased it for. So ideally, you want to size your array so it does just the right amount for your home, no more, no less. Net metering is a really complicated subject, so if there's any questions, certainly put them into the chat and we'll answer them either now or a little bit later as well. So I'm a visual learner, and I like to, I think that visual aids really help me out. So this is a visual of just how net metering works. And this is a real home that was done in September, I believe, of 2017. So the area here in the red indicates where this homeowner was using electricity throughout the day. So this is, over here it starts at midnight, and then it goes to 4 a.m., 8 a.m., noon, and then through the end of the day. So all of the area in red is where this home is using electricity. The area in green is where this homeowner's solar array begins to turn on. So her solar array will start right at about 7 a.m. It will then begin producing electricity pretty consistently a little past noon. And then as the sun starts to set, that solar electricity that is produced begins to go down until it goes away completely at about 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock when the sun sets. So as you can see, there's quite, these lines obviously don't match up, which is a really important, which is a really good indicator of why net metering is so important. So, and then this area in blue here is, as you can probably see, where they overlap. So this is where this person is using their solar electricity for their home in real time. And as you can see, this area in blue here, probably the smallest area of the three shaded colors. So essentially, you can think of net metering in a couple of ways. You can think of net metering in this instance as kind of taking this green and kind of shoving it in here to the red areas where that electricity would be needed. You can also kind of think of net metering as sort of a virtual battery, at least when it comes to your utility and your utility bill as well, because these often don't match up nearly as closely as they need to, which is why net metering is such an important policy. We also want to talk about the fact, this actually really highlights the fact too of if you do want to go off grid, it makes it so much tougher, because you can see when you're using the solar electricity in real time, it's a pretty small amount of your total daily use of electricity. So if you want to have, a pretty unencumbered life, if you want to, be able to watch Netflix in the evening, you're definitely going to want to go with a grid-tied array. All right, moving on. So we want to talk about what makes a home a good fit for solar. And the first thing we want to talk about is an unshaded roof. We used to first talk about which direction your roof faced, and that used to be south facing. South facing is still the best, but the most important rule now in making sure your home and your rooftop is ready for solar is that it's unshaded, that there aren't trees or other buildings that are blocking the way. If you do have a home that happens to be shaded, there are other options for you. There can be things like optimizers that are installed on the solar panels that will make those panels produce a little bit more electricity when the sun is shining on them. There's also the opportunity to participate, if you're an MG&E customer, for MG&E's shared solar program. I'm actually a member of that because, or I should say I've signed up for that myself because my home happens to have 3 really big maple trees in front of it. So there are options if you do have a shaded roof, but shade is definitely the most critical factor that we looked at when we're evaluating rooftops. The second biggest factor is the age of the roof. As I pointed out before, these solar panels rarely break down. They're warranted for 25 years. They typically last anywhere from 30 to 40 years, maybe even longer. And that time is about the age of a typical shingled roof. So ideally, we want to go in with as new a roof as possible. If you can go in with a brand new roof, that's great. If your roof is over 15 years old, you're probably going to want to think about replacing it. But if it's less than 10 years old, you're probably safe. So again, we want that because if you have to, at some point, have your panels removed and have your roof reshingled or redone, that's definitely going to eat into your return on investment time. So we definitely want to go in with a structurally sound roof right at the beginning. Again, a south-facing roof is best, but east and west-facing roofs are now okay too. That's partly due to net metering policies, and it's also due a lot to the increases in technology that we've seen over the last few years as well. And then finally, the other factor that we want to consider when we're evaluating whether or not our home is good for solar is our home's energy efficiency. It's best to not have to produce as much solar electricity. It's best to not have to produce more solar electricity than we need. If we can curb our consumption right away, you'll be able to purchase a smaller array. Your return on investment will be a little bit quicker as well. And it's also important to note that a lot of people, when they, I shouldn't say a lot of people, some people, after they do put in a solar array, kind of start to consume electricity a little bit less efficiently. And then they start to also lose some of their return on investment time as well. So ideally, the best kilowatt hour is the one that you don't have to use. So something to consider there as well. So that's essentially the end of the first part of this talk. That's kind of how solar works. Are there any questions? Check the chat here. Okay, if there aren't, then I'll move on to the second part, and that is, can solar actually work in Wisconsin? I know a lot of people certainly have doubts, especially anyone that's lived through a Wisconsin winter. It definitely can seem very cold, very dark at times, but we do get enough sunlight here in the Midwest to make solar work. So this is a map of how much sunshine strikes the earth every day in the US. So as you can probably guess, areas in California, Arizona, Nevada get a lot more sunlight. Those areas in orange and red receive a lot more sunshine than those in the purples and the blues. As you can probably guess, areas like Seattle, Portland definitely don't get as much sunshine. But right in the middle here in Wisconsin, in the yellow and the green, we do get enough. And we also get a lot more than Germany. And the reason Germany is on this map is because they made a very large investment nationwide in solar a few years ago. They get anywhere from 7 to about 12% of their electricity from solar and over 35% from renewables in general. In Wisconsin, we get less than 1% of our electricity from solar and only about 10% in total from all renewables. But as you can see, we're actually more geared to produce solar than even Germany is. So the main takeaway from this slide is sort of that if Germany can do it, we can certainly do it also here in the Midwest. Solar is also really reliable. I think a lot more reliable than a lot of folks think. In the Midwest, we're certainly very keen to weather and things like that. I know a lot of folks are, have this misconception that maybe solar panels are just, panes of glass. It's not quite the case, as you can see by this lovely animation here. The solar panels are guaranteed to withstand a golf ball size hail. They're also guaranteed to withstand hurricane force winds as well. So they're pretty sturdy and they're pretty reliable as well. And even, on cloudy days, when the sun isn't shining as much, your solar panels are still going to produce electricity. So the sun comes up every day, your solar panels are still going to make electricity even on cloudy days. However, they're not going to make electricity when we get a snowfall. So I'm just going to point that out right away. If we get a heavy snowfall, your solar panels will likely stop producing electricity. The good news is the amount of time that snow sits on your panels for is typically pretty short. Even if we get a very heavy, very intense snowfall, at most it will only stay on your panels for 2, 3, maybe 4 days. The panels, as you can see, are kind of a darker color. They're always electrified, so they typically stay a little bit warmer. They're also at an angle as well. They're usually flush mounted to your roof. Your roof is usually at somewhat of an angle. So because they stay a little bit warmer, the snow melts and it kind of eventually slowly slides right off the roof. So you don't have to do really any maintenance, even during a big snowstorm. In fact, we kind of discourage people trying to remove the snow themselves. The last thing you want to do is take a roof rake or another, shovel or something like that and damage your solar panels and void the warranty. So just remember that, if the snow falls, the solar panels are going to eventually take care of themselves. Moving on, another reason why solar is a good idea for Wisconsinites is it has become much more affordable. This graph right here, you can tell that I like moving images. This graph here indicates where solar costs have gone over the last decade. So the yellow line indicates the price of solar per watt, and the blue bars indicate the amount of solar that has been installed in the US over the last 10 years. So these two different parameters, as you can see, they're pretty related. As we develop more solar, as we bring in economies of scale, that price is allowed to come down by quite a bit. So the reason for that price drop, mainly due to economies of scale, also due in some degree to the technology as well. As the technology has increased, that price has been we've been able to fit more solar into a smaller space. So it's become more efficient, but the main takeaway, of course, from this slide is that costs have come down quite a bit. Like I said, about 75% for residential installations. Large solar installations like solar farms have come down anywhere from 85% to 90%, but still a very, very large drop in price just in the last 10 years. Another reason, kind of to piggyback on cost, not only is the cost down, but when you install solar, it actually helps out the value of your home. So this was a study done by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Colorado. And this study showed that homes sold for 20% faster and for 17% more than equivalent non-solar homes. So for instance, say you install solar in your home, and then a few years down the road, you and your neighbor who has a very similar house to yours, about the same size, about the same age, if you both go to sell your home at the same time, your home is going to sell for more money and it's going to sell for faster than your neighbor's. So that's essentially what that study showed. Basically, it's just a way of adding value to your home, a lot of value to your home in a very, very easy way. And this sort of made sense too. If you're a home buyer, if you're looking for a home that's going to have less costs associated with it, you're definitely going to want to go for the solarized home than the non-solarized home. Another reason why folks are installing solar in Wisconsin is it means local jobs. Solar installers are done by our friends, our neighbors, our relatives, and these are jobs that definitely cannot be outsourced. We have to have real boots on the ground to do these installations, and this is where solar job growth in the US has gone over the last 10 years. And as you can see, it kind of mirrors the earlier slide talking about installations. So the more installations we do, the more people we need and the more jobs we need to fill them. So this is just another way of kind of, especially during times like this, doing something like a solar installation can really help out the local economy quite a bit. Some people, of course, as you can probably guess, concerned about the environment. That might be the main reason why someone installs a solar array, but it's actually becoming less and less of a reason now, given where the economics of solar are. But if you're interested, a 5 kilowatt solar array, which is kind of the running example that we use tonight, that's just the average sized solar array for a home in Wisconsin, will offset almost 120 tons of CO2, over 200,000 miles of driving, and 14,000 pounds of coal as well. So if that's something you're interested in, those are kind of just some of the metrics that you can use to judge how environmentally friendly you are. Another reason folks install solar is to drive on sunshine. A lot of people now are purchasing electric vehicles. Electric vehicles are becoming much more common. They're becoming cool as well. That vehicle on the right is a Tesla. It actually belongs to a coworker of mine. And this is a way, by installing solar, if you already have an electric vehicle, this is a way for you not only to offset the cost of your electricity bills, but also a way for you to offset the cost of your fuel bills as well. So you can save quite a bit of money by doing an EV and a solar array at the same time as well. So something to think about too if you have an electric vehicle, or maybe if you're interested in purchasing an electric vehicle in your future. So as you can see, there's a lot of reasons to go solar. The main one, of course, is it works, even in a state like Wisconsin. It's become much, much more affordable. It can increase the value of your home. It can help out with the local economy. You can fuel your vehicle with it as well, in addition to powering your home. You can help with the environment, and of course, you can save a lot of money in the meantime, which is what we're going to be talking about next. Or even better, an all of the above approach. So at Renew, we really don't care what your reason is. In fact, we hope there are all these reasons, but as you can see, there are a lot of reasons to go solar. And now we're going to talk about the economics, because I think that's what a lot of folks want to hear about. They want to know what the cost is. And part of the reason for joining a group buy is the benefit of the cost. The main benefit to joining a group buy, though, is just the simplification of the process. We select a reputable solar contractor, we negotiate a set price, and we provide extra customer support and consulting services as well for homeowners too. Because again, a lot of people are not, have not purchased a solar array before. So it's definitely, it definitely benefits you to join a group buy, because we kind of help walk you through the process. So as I said, one of the big components is the price. We negotiate a set price, and that price this year is $2.93 per watt for North American made solar panels, and $2.88 per watt for imported panels. And I believe those panels this year are from South Korea. So all the panels work in the same way. The North American panels are a little bit more efficient. Each of those 72 cell panels, the North American ones will produce 370 watts each, whereas the imported panels, the 72 cell ones, will create 320 watts each. So, but again, they both work in the same way. A 5 kilowatt array in North American panels is still going to be a 5 kilowatt array in imported panels as well. This represents roughly a 6% discount from the normal price of our two solar contractors, and I should probably mention them at this time. One of them is Full Spectrum Solar, as you can see from the photo there. The other solar firm is Midwest Solar Power. They're both using the same exact materials, however, the same panels, the same inverters, so the only real difference is the folks installing them. So as I said, that represents about a 6% discount from their normal pricing. Unless you have a large house and you're installing a large system, I believe is over 8 kilowatts, that will result in about a 17% discount. So if you need a big array, you're actually going to save even more money through our group buy program. So some other ways to save money, in addition just to joining the group buy, is incentives. And the main one that I want to discuss is an incentive through Focus on Energy, which is a statewide energy efficiency organization. If you are not familiar with Focus on Energy, definitely Google them after this presentation is over with. They have all sorts of programs on energy efficiency, everything from incentives and rebates on solar panels all the way down to free light bulbs. So definitely check them out when you have a chance, if you have not already. So their main, they have an incentive for folks that install solar, and that is, it's a rebate for $200 per kilowatt. So for instance, if you installed a 4 kilowatt array, you qualify for their rebate, you would be able to get a $800 rebate from them. That rebate is capped at $1,000 unless you live in a rural zip code. I don't know if any of us here tonight will qualify for that, but that's an extra $500 bonus as well. To qualify for that Focus on Energy rebate, however, your rooftop has to be less than 10% shaded, and it also has to be within 90 degrees of due south. And basically what that means, and this is always kind of hard to explain, is your rooftop has to face anywhere from due west down to due south, and then back across to due east. Basically anything that isn't north facing. So as long as you have a roof that slopes somewhat to the south or to the east or the west, and it is not shaded, it's not too shaded, you should be able to qualify for that incentive. The other big rebate or incentive that we look at is the federal income tax credits. Those had been at 30% for quite a few years. This year, 2020, was the first year that they started reducing that credit. So this year, that tax credit is at 26% of the cost of the solar array. Next year, it will get reduced even further down to 22%. And unless something changes, that tax credit goes away completely in 2022. So definitely something to consider as you look at solar. If not this year, definitely you want to think about trying to do it next year, because that 26 and 22% tax credit is going to be really hard to make up for in falling material costs and labor costs and things like that. So definitely something to think about. Obviously, the tax credit depends on how much you pay into taxes. So if you don't pay enough to do that, say you only pay $1,000 of income taxes and your tax credit is for $2,000, what you can do is take $1,000 this year and then you can roll it over and do $1,000 next year. And as far as I know, you can continue to roll that over until you've actually met that what we call tax appetite. So definitely tax credits, big incentive to going solar. And for those of you who are interested in financing, so everyone kind of wants to know how to pay for these. We do have loan options available with the Clean Energy Credit Union. I believe Morgan can post a link to their website in the chat room. So if you want to learn more about a solar specific loan, you can visit that website. A lot of people do a home refinance loan as well, and then some people just pay cash for it too. So a lot of different options to pay for this. No option is the right way. It just depends on what works in your individual case. So now that we know all of that information, we can run through a cost exercise. So we're going to take, again, that same hypothetical 5 kilowatt array, which is again about the average for Wisconsin. If we take it and apply it to our group by pricing, that 5 kilowatt array will cost us $14,650. Assuming we qualify for a focus on energy incentive, that would reduce our price by $1,000. Again, the federal tax credit is no longer 30%, it's at 26. So 26% of that would be $3,549, which leaves us with an out-of-pocket cost of a little over $10,000. So we take a solar array that was almost $15,000 in price and reduce it down by about 30%, not quite 30%, but close, down to a little over $10,000. So again, this is just a very hypothetical situation. Not everyone is going to qualify for a focus on energy incentive. A lot of solar arrays are not going to be 5 kilowatts. They're going to be a little bit more, a little bit less. It just depends on the particular situation that you need for your home. But this is just a real basic cost example of kind of what the price might look like. Okay, so we're going to move on from there. Now that we know essentially how much our solar array will cost us out of pocket, we can calculate the solar energy value of that solar array. So if we take, again, that same hypothetical 5 kilowatt array, in Wisconsin, we get about an average of 1,500 hours of sunlight per year. So that includes, you know, change of seasons, cloudy days, things like that. If we take that 5 kilowatt array times 1,500 hours of good solar production every year, we get about 7,500 kilowatt hours of electricity produced from our solar array each year, again, with that hypothetical 5 kilowatt array. This is going to change quite a lot by year, and this depends on things as simple as weather patterns. Unfortunately, I think it was about 2 years ago, we had a particularly cloudy year, especially cloudy fall. A lot of people's solar arrays did not produce electricity to quite the degree that they wanted to, so something to think about. But now that we know essentially on average how much our solar array will produce, we can figure out how much money we're going to save in our utility bills by doing that. So if we take those, that 7,500 kilowatt hour figure. Depending on who your utility is, that savings per year is going to vary. So if you are on MG&E, which is I think what most of us are on, at 13 cents per kilowatt hour, you're going to save about $1,000 per year on energy bills. If you are an Alliant customer at 12 cents per kilowatt hour, you're going to save about $880. And if you're on a municipal utility like a Sun Prairie or a Wanatee, you're going to save about $750 per year. So it's very simple. We just take the amount of kilowatt hours and we multiply it by 13 cents per kilowatt hour. So that gives you an idea of how much money, again, on average, you're going to save. And by doing that, we can essentially calculate pretty easily, at least a ballpark figure, our return on investment. And if we are an MG&E customer, which I assume most of us are at $1,000 per year, it will take us approximately 10 years to pay off the solar system. It'll start essentially, making us money after that point. Because return on investments can vary so much, we like to tell folks that it's sort of a window. We typically say, a solar array will pay for itself in anywhere from about 8 to 12 years. And again, that varies on everything from how efficient your home is to, again, what kind of weather patterns we get throughout the year. But even at, about 12 or 13 year payback, this will equate to over $20,000 in savings over the 30 plus year lifespan of the solar array. So it's definitely a long game. You're not going to get rich off of installing a solar array, but you are definitely going to save a substantial amount of money. And this is, of course, assuming that utility rates do not escalate at all over the next 30 years, which is almost certainly not likely to happen. So definitely a good investment for your home, definitely a good investment for your pocketbook as well. So knowing all that, this is essentially what you have to do to get a solar array installed. So if you haven't already, go to www.madisunsolar.com /I'm interested. If you just go to MadiSunSolar.com, there's a tab at the top right hand of the page you can click on. It takes you to a form. To sign up, we'll ask you for some questions and some information as well about your home and about your electric use. After that, we'll give you a phone call. We'll talk about things, again, like your home, like your energy usage. We'll take a look at your rooftop via satellite. We'll make some recommendations for you, give you a ballpark figure of what you might be looking at for costs and incentives that you might qualify for. After that, if everything sounds good, we'll schedule a site assessment with one of our contractors. They'll actually come out, get on the roof, take a look at things, give you a much more thorough analysis of everything from, again, your rooftop to your electric use, and then they will issue you a proposal. This proposal lays out the specific size and type of your solar array and gives you a much better idea of the costs and the incentives that you will be able to qualify for as well. If that appears well and good, a contract gets issued. After the contract gets signed, the solar array gets installed. This entire process can take as little as about 3 or 4 weeks to as much as 3, 4, 5, 6 months. Right now, thankfully, that is much more on the lower end. We're still somewhat in the early parts of summer, but as we get more through the summer and closer into fall, typically that wait time begins to increase. But out of the maybe 1 month wait time, steps 1 through 5 take almost all of that time. The actual construction of the solar array only takes about a day or two. So it's really heavily weighted on the front end, which is why if you're thinking about it, you definitely want to take the time now to decide if solar is the right option for you or not. So that's all. I went slightly over, but not too much. I just want to make sure that I left some time for questions, and we're going to open the floor up to that right now. So I'm just going to go through. Morgan, can you jump on and let me know what questions we've received throughout the talk that I have not noticed or have failed to address, I should say?
Yep, it looks like we just have a couple questions right now. From
Okay.
Mark, he said, Do you have roofing contractors or specific shingles that are better than others for solar? I need to replace my roof within a year or two, so I figured now would be the time.
Yeah, yeah, actually, so a couple of questions there. So first of all, our solar contractors do work very closely with some roofing contractors too. So, people who specialize in roof repair and specialize in re-roofing. If you are looking to, if you were going to start out with a brand new roof and a new house, ideally you want to do a standing seam metal roof. That's just the easiest because the panels and the racking mechanisms for the panels can attach very easily. There's just some kind of like C-clamps that attach to the seams, and then the wires get rooted underneath that and then go into the house along the side, so they don't even have to make a penetration in the roof if you have a standing seam metal roof. If you have just a common shingle roof like a lot of us have, they will have to make a penetration in that roof, but they seal it with gaskets and other things like that. So they've never had any issues, to this date at least, in terms of leaking roofs or anything like that. So, sorry, that's kind of a long-winded question, but essentially, if you want to go with just the typical roof way, that's fine. Our solar contractors do partner with roofing contractors as well, and they can kind of get you to the front of the line if that's the only thing that's keeping you from installing solar.
Great. Another question from Stephanie. She said, if you are considering new construction, could you get someone involved to help make good decisions that way?
Yeah. So a lot of contractors are still kind of learning how solar works, just like homeowners, just like the rest of us are. Ideally, if you're going to say build a new house, you'd want your roof to slope south. You definitely, if you can orient it in a way so that trees are not blocking it, that's another big thing as well. But just kind of some of the things we talked about earlier, shading is really important, or lack of shading, I should say, is really important. Again, south is best, but east and west facing roofs certainly work as well. And also, you want to have a new roof. And if you're going to be building a new house, you're already going to fit that criteria. So those are kind of the two main things, again, that we looked at: just not shaded, whether by trees or by other buildings, and ideally south facing, but primarily just not north facing.
Another question from Mark. He asks, would the roof replacement be included in the 26% tax credit if it's done with the solar?
The roof is not included with that, unfortunately. The tax credits are just for new solar installations.
From Stephanie, do you ever do a raise not on a roof?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, my parents, who live in northern Minnesota, so solar can even work there, actually installed what we call a ground-mounted array. Typically, ground-mounted arrays they don't work as well in the city, only because typically homeowners don't have quite as much real estate to work with. If you live in a rural area or out in the country, ground-mounted arrays make a little bit more sense. So you certainly can do that even if you do live in the city, but it is going to take up some of your yards, some of your land. Another thing too is, as hard as this might be to believe, ground-mounted arrays actually cost a little bit more. They need to do trenching of the wires and things like that, so they have to get a backhoe and some other things out there. It requires a little bit more planning and a little bit more labor time, so that's why the cost is actually a little bit more for a ground-mounted array, but is definitely something that can be done. I don't believe, however, that you can get the group buy pricing with a ground-mounted array. I think those are only for rooftop arrays.
Stephanie asks, I was considering Jefferson County. Do you work there, or what's the area that you can participate in this group buy?
We'd have to see exactly where your home is in Jefferson County. My inclination is probably no. We typically just do MadiSUN in the MadiSUN area, but I'd have to see exactly how close you are. So if you want to, I do have my email address up there on the board now too. So if you want, you can send us an email. We'll take a look at that and give you a more exact answer to that question. But yeah, unless I can see how far it away is, I don't know for sure. These are great questions. Thank you everyone very much for the participation. I really appreciate it. Okay. Well, we still have a few more minutes, so I'd be happy to stick around. But again, I did put my email up there, so I'm sam@renewwisconsin.org. Morgan's email we can include as well. Morgan, if you just want to maybe put that in the comment section so people can email you as well, that would be fine. Again, this is being recorded too, so if you know, if you want to go back and review part of it at a later date, we will have that up hopefully on our website relatively soon. And also, like I said, if you think of questions later on, you can certainly feel free to email either of us. So thank you very much for attending. And unless there are any other questions, then we'll probably call it a night.
All right.
Okay. Did you hit stop on the record?